So thanks everyone for coming. I just wanted to sort of open the session and hand over to John. As you know, last week was Are You OK Day on the 9th, but really it was really just a trigger and a reminder to us about how we do need to keep mental health in the forefront of our minds. And, you know, if we think about the experience we've all had just in this last year, and Noble's, many of our colleagues, we have a branch in Sydney, a branch in Melbourne. These guys have spent, you know, nearly 300 days in lockdown, and, you know, people have been really doing it tough. And not only have people been impacted by lockdowns and COVID, people's family situations have changed, and never more than now have I spoken to so many people about challenges that they're experiencing, right? So we thought it was a good time to maybe have a bit of a chat about mental health and talk about, you know, what are some of the signs and things that we could look for to help one another. And also have this opportunity to have a presenter like John join us so that our shift workers and guys who can't be here can also watch our session and maybe hopefully get something out of it. And for me, the message for me is it's okay to say we're not okay. I'm really passionate about mental health. I've spoken to many of you individually about this, and you know, the more we talk about this stuff, the better it is to help one another know that we're not alone when we're experiencing tough times, and that we all struggle sometimes, and that's okay. So I'd like to introduce formally John Mannion, who's the Executive Director of Breakthrough Mental Health Research Foundation. That's a mouthful.
Breakthrough to our friends.
Breakthrough for short. We're really fortunate to have John with us. John has over 30 years experience in mental health, and he has got a wealth of knowledge working in this arena, and, you know, now more than ever, it's more and more important. Another thing you may not know about John, he's recently been announced as a Mental Health Commissioner for South Australia. So we're very fortunate to have him with us. Thank you, John. I'm going to hand over to you.
Cool, thank you. Thanks very much, Karen. I might just take a quick sip of my coffee.
30 grams, that's what it said, wasn't it?
Right, don't worry, I'll cut
Usually do a seat once.
I've got it.
All right. So thanks very much for inviting us to join you today. We thought we'd take you on a little bit of a journey. I think mental health story is a journey, and we've got quite a little bit of information for you to share. But also more than happy for you to stop me. More than happy for you to ask a question. More than happy for you to say, you speak in a funny accent and I'm not quite sure what you're talking about, and that's okay. I actually don't think I've got an accent. I think you all have. So, yeah. I'm the Executive Director of Breakthrough Mental Health Research Foundation, which is a foundation that was established 3.5 years ago, and we wanted to look at it for a reason to try and drive a change. So, as I said, I've worked in the mental health arena. I'm into my 34th year. Started off as a mental health nurse in the northwest of England, then did my social work over in Manchester, ran a large service over in the UK, and then came to Adelaide and became the Executive Director for Clinical Mental Health Services for the south of the city. So that was for Repats, Flinders, no longer, and then some of the state services. And then a number of years ago was asked, you know, if you could drive a change, if you could look at something different, if you could stop the deterioration taking place, would you be interested in doing something like that? And so for a mental health person, that's like, of course I would. I would want anybody to be experiencing distress and would want to change that. I was approached by the chairman of Flinders Foundation, Alan Young, to say, well, what happens if we actually established and set up a foundation that really just looked at mental health, that started to invest into mental health research, started to ask some of those questions, why do things happen? Because it's complex. Would you be interested? And I hadn't realised that this cup of coffee I was having actually was my interview. That's how it started. And so, of course, I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. And we were very fortunate to be given a bit of time to actually scope it out. So why do we scope it out? So why would we want to do something about it? So we know the mental health landscape is a complex landscape. But we also know there's a whole range of statistics that sit behind it. So 1 in 5 of us will experience a diagnosable mental health issue this year. Right? So that's 2 of us in this room, possibly. That's just in this year. What we also know then that those first presentations, about 50% of those will happen before the age of 16. And 75% of those presentations will actually happen before the age of 24. So we know that the prevalence of this is high, because with those statistics, that actually means we'll actually all know somebody experience a mental health challenge, or it could be us ourselves. What we also know.
I'll do a really big.
I'll get to know you.
What we also know from a challenging perspective is the statistic around suicide. So we lose 9 Australians every day to suicide. So that works out at 3,318 Australians that we lost their lives during 2019. So I was a year behind our data set, because we have to have our data set given to us from the coroners, because the coroner really has to identify, is this a death by suicide? What we know about that is that's actually deteriorated. Previous statistics in 2018, it was 8. So despite the fact that we're actually putting lots of intervention in place, despite the fact that we're actually talking about it more, we're still having these deteriorations. Now, I listened to a presentation yesterday from the chief psychiatrist, which is actually showing us the data set post-COVID actually hasn't changed. We thought we might see an increase. What we are seeing is an increase of people reaching out, which is beautiful. That's what we want people to be able to do, to feel safe, to be able to do that. We're not seeing a growth in the suicide rates. So that's a great positive. But with those data and those statistics, what we do know is this is complex. There's not just one reason why somebody really starts to struggle with their mental health challenges. And what we wanted to look at was, well, if we know these stats and we know they're complex and we know there's not a major change in it, why aren't we actually finding some of those answers? Why is it still difficult? It's not a big nod. And this is what we wanted to do. We posed the question, could we create a life free of mental illness? What would that actually look like? Bearing in mind that we know it's really, really complex. And we said that we wanted to do this because not one of us in this room would accept the fact that we haven't found a cure for cancer. Not one of us would accept coronary heart disease, diabetes, childhood illnesses. Yet we've become a little bit 1 in 5 don't experience a mental health issue, and we sort of accept that. And so what we wanted to look at was that, why is that? Why is that acceptable? Yeah, in any other area of our health, we don't accept that as a challenge. So we said that we wanted to invest into that research to drive that change. We wanted to invest in actually create a life free of mental illness. But what does that actually look like? So we came up with the concept of, wouldn't it be incredible if we could live a life sort of free from any restrictions? The freedom to chase your dreams, to fulfill achievement things. Freedom to be able to leave your home, to build relationships, to fall in love. The freedom from the economic and social impacts. And then maybe freedom for our family and friends who we might feel really, really conscious about that our illness is impacting them. What we said that's what a life free of mental illness could actually be. It's not saying that we can actually get rid of the pressures, that people won't experience anxiety, won't experience depression, won't experience eating disorders. But could we live a fulfilled life when we know more about it, when we've got more understanding, when we've actually reached out, when we've actually accepted the complexity? And that's what we wanted to look at. So we wanted to do it in a way in which we could then invest into sort of research to ask some of those questions. Because in the mental health world, 60% of everything we do has no evidence to prove it works. So if 60% of everything you produced on the production line was faulty, it'd be a rubbish business, wouldn't you? Yet in the health world, in the mental health world, we've still got this complexity. So we invested into a range of different research focus. So here in South Australia, we wanted to build on the strengths of our universities. And so to do that, we'd had an analysis done by Ernst Young. And they really wanted to look at, where does the mental health dollar go and where would be the best place, a new foundation we could actually invest to make a difference. And so we said we wanted to focus on the strengths of the state. So we've got great universities here at Flinders and at UniSA and Adelaide, but also at SAMRI. And we've got some incredible partners that are across Australia. So we've got a partnership with Sydney University. And we said that if we built on our strengths, what happens if we focused on youth? What happens if we actually focused on Indigenous mental health? What if we actually focused on eating disorders and then depression? All areas we've actually all heard about, all areas that perhaps will touch each one of us individually. Could we drive a change to actually? So last year we were able to invest into 20 new pieces of research here in South Australia. We now to look at a piece of research that's actually doing a saliva test. So you can do a saliva test that actually identifies which is the best antidepressant for you, what is the dose you should take. Precision research, precision treatments for depression. Have precision research and treatments for cancer. Here's an opportunity to actually do that for depression. And that would be a game changer, because I don't know if anyone's ever been to their doctor to actually start to talk about antidepressant medication, but it's usually between a 12 and an 18-month period of time before you get the right medicine with the right dose that's individual for you. Because every one of us in this room will take 2 paracetamol to get rid of a headache and it'll work. But not everyone can take 20 milligrams of Prozac and have that impact, because we're all individual, we all absorb medication in a different way. So we've got that precision sort of treatment in that place. Then we've got programs that are actually looking about, what about social impacts? What about social eating for older people? What we know is that our older population are experiencing severe levels of isolation, disconnectivity, which is then increasing that higher risk of depression. And what we're finding now, the 65-year-old category and age group of men who have lost their partners are now becoming our higher risk population of suicide. But what happens if we could change that? What happens if we could actually change the narrative and explore different ways in which we could connect people? So we have worked with Flinders University, and they've done a program that's actually looking at social eating, positive impacts of 12 weeks, meeting with the same 12 people, cooking a meal together and measuring the impact on their well-being. And I was very fortunate to be invited into the last session. And I just asked them the question. The researcher was there and he did give them all the stuff about how great this has actually been. And I just said to him, why do you really come? Why would you want to be part of this piece of research? And there was only one man in the room, and he said, this research has changed my life. So I lost my wife a number of years ago, and I never thought I'd have the ability to love anybody again. And he said, not love in a relationship, but just to love people. And he said, I've all of a sudden connected with 11 new individuals. That's changed my life. I get excited about coming to the program. I've got a sense of purpose and a sense of belonging, which I never thought I'd have. Another lady in the room said, well, I'd lost my husband and I'd suffered severe depression because of that. And I actually had really low self-worth. In fact, I didn't believe it was worth me going out and meeting people. I didn't think it was valuable. I didn't think I actually deserved it. And now I've come to this group. She said, I go op shopping with Doris after the group. I've got this connection, started wearing lipstick again. It's a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, someone feeling valued. And then finally, another lady who finished, she said, I live in a residential village with 250 people. I'm so lonely. Surrounded by 250 people, but I'm on my own. And she said, I now come to group and I'm a massive reader, and I've had anxiety for a long period of time, and to actually come into the group was really difficult for me. But now I actually read 11 new chapters of people's lives every week we get together. Just by joining together and cooking a meal. It's so powerful to actually look at that context. And then through to some really dynamic work, we've developed a program in youth mental health services. It's actually looking about supporting younger people who've had suicidal ideation or even acted and attempted suicide in their lives. And it's actually a program that's actually working very, very closely with the family. And so it's called dialectical behavioral therapy. It's basically a way in which you actually understand your emotions, you regulate those emotions, you learn a new set of communication skills and connect with your family. And so it takes 26 weeks of 2 hours each week for a mother or father and their loved one to come to a group. Now, in the mental health world, we have high dropout rates of our programs, yet this program has not had one person drop out. Now done 2 courses, had 20 families actually go through the program. And we got a beautiful letter. You get to go to the graduation where you actually listen to younger people who at the start of the course would not even look you in the face, stand up in front of the rest of their group and actually give the feedback on what it's actually been like to be part of the program. And then you listen to the parent's story, thanking you for saving their child's life. Thank you for saving their relationship. And the research that's been aligned to it is actually identified through the program. Children have developed 25% of new skills on how to communicate with their family and how they can communicate and manage the distress they're experiencing. And it's also shown a 75% reduction in suicide risk. So massive impact. These are now 20 families that won't be part of the 9 deaths we get. So the research we wanted to drive is to try and drive change, and it's very, very diverse around that. Next year, we're looking at a whole range of programs, which we've just been chatting about in our meeting today. We'll be looking at about $1.2 million to reinvest back. We can't do that on our own because we're a charity. We get no money from the federal government, no money from the state government. Everything we do is generated through donations, through our fundraising programs. Jade's with me today. She's the head of our fundraising strategies and looking about all those community connectivities. So we've got $1.2 million of reinvestment our community have given back to actually give back to their community, because we want to do something about it. But not. So that's who Breakthrough are. But one of the big parts of our work is also then coming out and meeting the community, talking about mental health, normalizing the conversation, changing the way in which we have the conversation and doing it in a safe way. As you mentioned last week, you had Are You OK Day, and Are You OK Day is a beautiful, beautiful concept. Do you know the story sitting behind it? So the story that sat behind it was the gentleman and his best mate caught up one day, and his mate was worried about him. He noticed a difference, and he asked him, was he okay? And like everyone in this room, when we asked that question, he got brushed off. Yeah, of course, yeah. You don't look it. Worried about you. I've noticed a change. And then it was Gavin Larkin then opened up and said, I'm really, really worried. I lost my dad to suicide. My dad had everything. I've got everything. I've got a beautiful wife. I've got a beautiful house. I live in Sydney. Why am I feeling so despondent that I actually feel I'm going to mirror my dad, feeling at risk of ending my own life? And his friend then said, well, what can we do about that? And he said, well, you've started to do something because you've actually got me to start to think about it. And Gavin then explored that whole concept of what was the icebreaker that took place? What was the trigger that somebody asking, was I okay, stopped me thinking in a different way? And then he explored it further. He explored the whole concept of asking one question actually reduces risk. Asking it twice doubles reduction of risk. So the program was built on if we could have a safe conversation where people actually reached out, people actually noticed signs, symptoms, we could actually then drive a change in the mental health world. So I think is it 10 years? It's been going 12 years now, I think, here in Australia, which is absolutely incredible. Challenge we face, though, is how do we make sure we have that conversation, are you okay, 365? It's an everyday conversation. How can we actually drive that? Because the risk I think we face is that, last week it's everywhere, this week it's nowhere. So how do you carry on having that conversation? But also, how do you actually do it in a safe way where you actually build up people's skills? Because not everyone actually understands what mental health is. We know words around it. So we've heard about anxiety, we've heard about depression, we've heard about the eating disorders, we've heard about dementia. These are all words we've possibly heard. But then we've heard other words, haven't we? Like nutter, crazy, off his head, toughen up, princess. All the language that often sits behind it is often quite negative in its angle. So how do we drive that change? How do we look at educating people? How do you actually normalize a conversation to make it to be safe? But also, how do you give people skills to do that? What are the things we should actually be looking out for? I think. So, Are You OK is based on 4 questions, and it's based on a concept, and they have a character called Alec. And he asks you to actually ask, to listen, to encourage, and then to check back in. Yeah. But when would you know how to do that? What are the things you should actually be looking out for? So as part of the work that Breakthrough have been doing with our sporting community, and this is how we've got the connection with Guy, is because we've got a relationship with Adelaide Crows, Adelaide Footy League, Sandful League, Sport SA, soccer, netball, because sport's a beautiful vehicle to bring people together, but for a mental health organisation, it's the perfect vehicle to actually talk, to connect with people. So we developed a concept called the 5 signs. Would you know what to look out for in your friends to see if they were showing signs of deterioration, signs of unrest, signs of trauma, signs of unhappiness? So these are some of the things you could actually learn, realise that walk and talk. So I probably won't get out of the screen about an hour ago. Have you noticed a change in how you're feeling yourself or how one of your friends are feeling? Have there been changes in attitudes to their work, to their play, to their connection? Maybe they're being a little bit less engaged than they would normally be. You might see that alteration. This person was always the first in work, they'd always got the coffee on, they always said hello to everybody. Now they're just getting in just in time to clock in for the shift, and once shift over, they've gone. We noticed that change that would be out of their normal presentation. But people have been finding it difficult to actually concentrate, to actually complete tasks, to see things through. And are they making maybe simple mistakes that would never normally be? They're normally the perfectionists. They normally get everything right. And so we're starting to see these little tweaks and changes. Have they then, because of that, started to become withdrawn? I don't want people to notice I'm struggling. I don't want people to notice I'm actually quite anxious. The fact to actually walk into this room and sitting and listen to a presentation with somebody else talking about what might be me too much, so I'm not even going to go into that. So I'll avoid it. So they started to show signs where they're withdrawing, becoming less social than they normally would be. There may be changes in that social interactivity. So the person that all of a sudden stops coming to every social event, stops actually coming into work, avoids work, doesn't even go out to do the shopping, etc. And are they then starting to have an increase of anxiety when they're actually put into that social situation? So all of a sudden you see changes where people are talking, but they won't look me in the eye. Well, I'm happy to talk here, but actually they're always stepping back. Yeah, so we're seeing this withdrawal of people taking place. And then are we seeing signs of agitation and changes in behaviours that are a little bit more evident to us? So people experiencing changes in mood, so this high level of mood, this high anxiety, through to that lower feelings of depression. No one would even notice I wasn't here. In fact, I'm probably the weak link in our team. In fact, I won't even go into work because that's not worth it. Yeah, so we're seeing that alteration change. Are we seeing changes in the way in which people are communicating? So I'm a bit of a mild-mannered janitor. I'm very sort of calm and relaxed. But if I get agitated, then my sort of Liverpool side of me comes out, and there might be a few F words sneak in and stuff. And that's a sign when I'm getting a bit distressed, because normally I'm quite calm around that. So you're seeing that change taking place. We're seeing things disappearing in front of us. Sorry, just come back one second. Are we seeing people might start to show signs of frustration, things that wouldn't normally be a pressure point for them? We talk about the stress vulnerability cup. We have this cup, don't we, which we wake up in every day, and it's normally half full. And some things can go wrong. I get stuck in traffic, I get a bit pissed off, but I'm okay about it. I get into work and my emails crashed, I'm okay. And then the boss comes in and I get told off for something. It wasn't really my fault, it was the team's fault, but I'll take it on board for the team. Yeah. Or do we come in that one day and we're stuck in the traffic and it just is the meltdown? The one thing that was too much for us to actually cope with. So are we seeing changes that we're getting frustrated a lot easier? Do we then change and say either become too rigid in some of the things? I'm fixed, this is what I'm doing, I can't move on from this. Or we actually go to the other extreme where we just become really sort of inflexible in what we're actually talking about and show more signs of irritability. And then that final part, how many of us go to bed at night and just shut our eyes and go, oh, good night, and off we go? Or is that when our mind starts to race and we actually can't turn off? We're constantly thinking about everything. We're reliving things that happened during the day. We're reliving the conversation I had with someone, or the comment that somebody made, or the criticism that happened, and it just becomes really exaggerated. And then how do we manage that? Does that mean we start to neglect ourselves? So we're neglecting ourselves in that we might become late to get to work. We're not actually connecting in and actually turning up the places. Starting to see that we're actually using a whole range of maladaptive coping strategies, because none of us in this room obviously use alcohol as a release. It's purely a social thing. But what happens when that social one drink becomes two, becomes the bottle? I was talking to some farmers on Kangaroo Island. We're doing some work on the island, and they were saying to me on a Friday night, a group of farmers would get together and they'd have a slab of beer. Talk about the week, off they went. Post-fire, the same outcome is done with a pallet. That is what they've had to do to help them through that stress and stage. So that's a sign of a real trigger for us. So we're seeing that. Are we seeing risk-taking behaviours? Are we seeing people who might start to utilise other substances, give them the energy or the coping strategy to deal with what's actually happening? Are we seeing changes in our presentations? People, during COVID, we all grew a beard. Post-COVID, we kept it because we thought it made us look younger. What happens if it becomes unkept and it's got food in it? What happens if we actually have food down our tops? We're wearing the same clothes we've been wearing for a number of days. We actually stop washing. We actually stop caring for ourselves. And these are signs for us to look out for. And then we're starting to eat unhealthily or stopping doing things that we're usually our escapism. So that exercise, that regular pattern, that regular change that we actually do. So we're starting to see these different levels of neglect. And finally, we sort of might start then to see whole conversations about, am I worth it? Have I got feelings of hopelessness? Might start to have a conversation with someone and they're going, no one would even care if I wasn't here. I'm rubbish at this. Yeah. That real despondent, I can't get up, can't get myself out of bed, can't connect with anybody, I withdraw even more. And for them, it might feel that everything that was exciting has been totally sucked out of their lives. I think the best description is, who in this room is actually going to admit to being a Harry Potter fan? Yeah, we all know. Yeah. So Harry Potter has the Dementors. Dementor is a character that's a ghost that comes down over the main characters, and it sucks out memories. Yeah. And that was the best way in which J.K. Rowling actually described her depression. She said it felt as though anything that was enjoyable, anything that was actually connected, anything that gave her pleasure was totally sucked out of her life. When someone's experiencing severe levels of depression or anxiety, that's what it can feel like. So we actually stop participating in all those things that are really good. Now, any one of us can have one of these 5 signs. We don't have to have all 5 to be struggling. We could just have one of these things. But every one of us in this room might notice in ourselves, and we might notice in our friends. So how do you then do and have the "Are you okay?" conversation if you've experienced this or you've seen it? So we're going to talk about how you might want to have that conversation. So a mental health conversation actually is a simple conversation. We just get scared about having it. Because we're scared in case, what happens if I say to someone, "Are you okay?" and they go, "No." I go, "Oh my God, I haven't read second page yet." Because that's the fear for us, isn't it? What happens if we'll know how to do that? Will I know how to respond? The powerful thing about a mental health conversation is the fact you're actually having it. So don't get hung up on language. Don't get hung up on, will I know what to do? The most powerful thing is the fact you actually asked the question, and then you were prepared to sit with someone and listen to them. The period of time when I feel hopeless, period of time I feel no one's connected with me, period of time when I think no one that I've noticed wasn't here, all of a sudden one of my colleagues just asked me, "Okay," and then said, "No, actually, are you really okay?" That's power in itself. Now, there's nothing that actually says in the mental health conversation you have to fix it for anybody, because actually you can't. The only person that can fix it is the person themselves. But to have someone stood next to them is empowering. To have someone making them feel I'm not on my own, to have someone that's actually understanding, to have someone that reconnects, really help that person on that journey. So how can you do it? So what we want you to look at, if you're ever concerned about one of your mates, concerned about yourself, and you do reach out, have you really got time to have that conversation? Are you in the right place to actually do it? Have you got the right time to do it? Because if you have someone at the okay and they go, "Oh no, I'm really struggling," well, I'll be free next Tuesday if you want to catch up with them. It's not the answer someone's wanting. If they've acknowledged and they've reached out, that's the perfect time for that conversation. It might have taken them 6 months' courage to actually say, "I'm struggling." And if somebody does say to you, "Yeah, I'm struggling," that's an incredible thing, because you've made them feel safe to do that. Whatever you're doing is beautiful because it's connecting, it's showing a compassionate approach, and it's showing a way in which you're actually really interested in somebody. So make sure if you're going to do it, have you got time? Also, can you find somewhere private to do it, somewhere you're not going to be disturbed? Now, that's not saying you have to go into a therapy room. Most of this room is men. We are terrible actually having a mental health conversation facing each other. But if you lean us against a wall and have a conversation where we can all stare out and not actually look at anybody, we'll join you. Yeah. If we go for a walk, we'll have it, because again, we're not threatened by that conversation. We can walk and have a mental health conversation together like anyone else. Yeah. We look at different ways to do it. But trying to find somewhere where you can go for a walk, trying to find a quiet room, trying to find a space where people won't be looking in. You know, I've noticed most of your offices are glass fronted, so we work in an open plan office, even harder. But you can actually have a mental health conversation in some incredible places. I've got a friend who's a footy player, and she has the mental health conversation with one of her colleagues when they're doing the stretches. They go underneath the goalpost at the start of each training session. She checks in with her friend, and her friend knows she's going to check in because they pair up to do that stretching together. That's a safe place to have it. No one else in the team has it. Conversation lasts the 3 or 4 minutes to do the stretch, and they get on with the rest of their session. So it can be done in really, really inventive places. Make sure, though, if we are checking in, be prepared to actually ask twice. You know, we've mentioned earlier, if we say, "Are you okay?" most of them are going fine. If you're asking on this year's campaign was the question, "Are you really okay?" And ask it the 3rd time. I had to piss somebody off totally. I go, "Will you leave me alone?" Or they'll actually realise you are really wanting to have that conversation. And think about how you do it. We talk about I statements. I'm asking because I've noticed a change in you. Notice you're not your normal self. Notice you're not as chippy. I've noticed you coming into work late. I notice it looks like you're struggling. By doing that, again, it's about this connection conversation. Also then, all you need to do is to listen. Now that's really hard also, because most of us will start to listen and we start to problem solve. We want to fix it for somebody because we want to take that stress away from somebody. When we do that, when we start to problem solve, we've actually stopped listening. Try and listen without judgment. Try and listen to what's being said. Paraphrase back, even if you don't understand how hard that must be. Simple things like, that must be really, really difficult for you. That's actually never happened to me. Would you mind explaining more so I can understand it more? Again, it's the way in which you're keeping that conversation, that connectivity. You might want to then at some point in time encourage them to seek some help. You might not be the right person, but you might know somebody at work is. So we already know that Doris in HR is a really good listener. She's trained in mental health first aid. I think it'd be really good if you had a chat with her. She might be able to help you get the right support. Or it could be, we've got EAP at work. Do you know how to access that? Do you want me to help you do that? It's free, it's confidential. I've got the number if you want me to help me to do that. Or who's helped you before? Has this happened before? Did it work? Would you like to look at a few different options? So it's about trying to get that connection. And then I think this is the most powerful one. Check in the next day. Trust your gut. If someone's opened up to you, send that text the next morning. Thanks for chatting to me yesterday. I'm always here if you want to have another talk. And I was saying this. I did a presentation one day, and I got a phone when I got home. I got a phone call from one of my friends, and he goes, "Have you been talking at my dad's football club?" I said, "Yeah. Why?" He said, "I got 3 texts." I said, "Oh, sorry about this." He said, "No, it's great." I said, "It was 3 of my friends that I used to play at that club. They all reached out to me because they know I've had anxiety issues." He said, "But the most powerful thing for me was the fact that boys obviously were listening. They listened to what you said and they sent me that message." He said, "And that made me feel good." So sometimes mental health isn't rocket science. Sometimes it's about compassion. Sometimes it's about connectivity. Sometimes it's about making someone not feel on their own. Because when you're struggling with your anxiety, struggling with your depression, this can feel the most loneliest place for you. Yet if somebody reaches out to you, it can have such power. But also then, it's important you look after yourself. It is not your job to take all these worries away. It's not your job to fix things, because you can't do that. And it's unfair if somebody expects you to do that. But what you can do is actually be in a strong place to touch point with them and then help them and guide them and then reconnect. That can be really, really powerful. So there's a whole range then of support mechanisms you can go through, so you've got this presentation now. So we have mental health triage. It's a 24-hour-a-day number run by mental health clinicians. And if you're worried about somebody, you're worried about yourself, you can phone up and have a conversation with them. Just have a chat and they'll signpost or guide you. Obviously, you've got Lifeline, Beyond Blue, and through to, if you're really worried about someone from a crisis perspective, phone an ambulance, get that support for them. So we've provided this information for you. So we talk about mental health and lots of information, lots of stats, and we say, well, why does it actually happen? This is my family. I'm one of 7. And this was taken at my dad's 80th birthday. So this actually is 6 years ago now. He's a very sprightly 86. And this was back home in England, back to visit for his birthday. Now, in our family, we have a dentist. We have manager of mental health services. We have a special needs teacher, special needs music teacher, special needs higher education teacher, a manager of an autism children's service, and a kitchen designer for IKEA. We reckon he's adopted. Comes from that care environment. Beautiful family, brought up in the northwest of England, small unit or small community. I'm the only Everton fan. They're all Liverpool fans. Terrible to be put in that environment. But the one person that's missing then is my mum. And we lost my mum to a very aggressive cancer at the age of 68. And so we had this beautiful unit, and all of a sudden, mum's not there. And then 2 of my siblings experienced severe depression associated with the loss of my mum. One, it triggered off a bipolar disorder for her, and another managed the grief and loss through utilising cannabis to numb the pain. So 4 out of 7 struggled with mental health issues. Yeah, we were brought up in a beautiful home, beautiful environment, good education. Mental health doesn't care who you are, where you come from. It impacts any one of us. But I don't describe my brothers and sisters by what's happened to them. I describe them by their careers, because their mental illness and challenge they face doesn't define who they are. It's part of who they are. It's part of life's experience. But it's quite handy, I suppose, having a mental health clinician in your family, because then you can help and you can signpost and you can guide. At the same time, I also get that throwback, don't use that mumbo jumbo on me. But each one reached out, each one spoke about it, very honest and open conversations. Every one of them has actually got the support and mechanisms they needed. But I share about the Meet the Manions because we're a bit like the Fockers. But in that respect, it's because that's a normal family. It's a normal everyday conversation. It's a normal connectivity. It could be any one of us.
Did you notice before they mentioned it to you that they were different?
Bit of a challenge because they're all still in the UK and I'm here. So for some I did because I noticed the early onset. So mum passed away while I was still in England. Some it was a delayed reaction. Some it was straight away. So my brother, my youngest brother, my little brother, beautiful. He really struggled because he felt that he hadn't had as long with his mum as the rest of us had. That grief and that loss. So his was around grief. Two of my sisters struggled really severely with the depression of losing the centre point, that strong person, the person they always went to when there was a problem. And then my sister had the bipolar. That was a trigger a number of years later. When she was back, it was everything she felt she was managing and controlling that she lost control of. But if I was then to say, would I have noticed things? I knew who would struggle the most. And then you also, it's really quite surprising on the ones that you think might struggle and who are incredibly resilient who helped everyone else. So the kitchen designer, my brother Tony, he's just always this solid sounding board for him. Yeah, we thought he might be the one that might struggle with. Yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it? Things we think. So, what about life then? So we know that within our workplace, we're trying to put a whole range of different things in place to support each other. We know that we actually put plans in place. So you might have a mental health plan for the workplace. You might have EAP. You might think you've got control of everything in your lives. You try and get everything into check. But sometimes we get sent curveballs, don't we? Sometimes we get sent things that we can't actually control. And so 3 weeks ago, a group of the team went up to Larapinta. This is one of the water lakes in Larapinta. And we went there, there was 13 of us to trek Larapinta to fundraise for Breakthrough. We were plotted, we planned, we got together as a whole team. Everybody on that group had a connection to mental health. In fact, around the campfire at night, every one of them shared their personal story and came up with a beautiful line, "We're all a little bit broken." Yeah, we had CEOs of finance companies, we had owners of two building companies, we had a kitchen building company, we had a chef, we had a manager of mental health service, we had a media and communication specialist, all in these high profile positions, all then sharing that connectivity. And we were sort of sent a bit of a curveball because my wife joined us on the trek. She'd done all the preparation, all the planning. She's OCD to the point of, I need to make sure I'm fit enough to do this. I need to make sure I've got the right outfit to do it. I need to make sure shoes are all correct. She went out every day in preparation. The one thing she didn't prepare for was falling over on day one on top of a cliff and breaking her arm. Yeah, because you can't prepare for some of those things. And then what you see then is she's now known as the Larapinta legend of the group, because we still had 4 kilometres to hike. So there's no, up in Larapinta, there's no helicopter technology. So strapping her arm up, strapping it into place. We were very fortunate. We had a doctor on the team. The doctor on the team has been the medical doctor for Survivor for the last 5 years. What was the chance of, we'd only met her the day before. What was the chances of that? Which was great because she had to make a splint out of a walking stick. She had to do a frame wrapped around using her own jacket. Didn't even have a triangle bandage because the first aid kit we provided was out of date and was actually for a different first aid trip, not for a trek. So all the prep and planning we thought we had in place. So Renee, my wife Claire, trek back down with us. And she might have been given some substance that made her laugh a lot, and also get rid of her fear of heights. She's petrified of heights, yet she was leaning over trying to take photographs one-handed because she was a beautiful shot of a tree that was shown in the valley. I'm like, come back, come back. But the plan was that we thought we had everything in place. Yeah, and in our lives, sometimes we think we have everything in place. And this then meant that we got had to leave the trek. We had to go down, and we actually then spent 3 days in Alice Springs Hospital, and she had to have surgery, to have pins and plates. Now, I haven't got a picture of Claire up on this slide, where we're in the emergency department of Alice Springs. For those who don't know my wife, she's known for her smile. She's always got this beautiful smile. And she's in Alice Springs, and she's all strapped up, and all you see is the smile. You don't see the arm, and that's what she's like. But what it showed, though, was around connection that then takes place. Connection of relationships and how important those relationships are. As we were leaving the trek, every one of the guys and girls came up to Claire. Every one of them said something to her. Everyone gave her contact. Everyone blew her a kiss. Everyone gave her a hug. She left there feeling part of something really, really big. Our workplaces can do that for us, that one connection. And my wife suffers from depression. I have a bout of depression probably once or twice a year. And I was really worried this was going to be a trigger for her. Her power and her strength, because of how people had made her feel, meant that the only time she really got frustrated was when she was waiting to be discharged. She was frustrated that she'd missed out on the trek. She was frustrated that she hadn't been able to complete stuff. But it didn't cause the trigger I thought it would have done, because she'd put herself in a very strong place. The group had wrapped themselves around her. Me, on the other hand, not quite the same. So this is what it's like when you wrap yourself around with really good friends that you shouldn't trust. So this is the last morning of our trek. I was able to get back and just take part in the last 2 days. And Claire was very adamant I needed to do that. Because obviously we'd gone away with a group of people, and it was for breakthrough, and that was my responsibility. Two responsibilities of one to care for my wife, and then one to make sure the group had a great time. As you can see, they had a fabulous time. But what this is around really, and the reason I'm showing this picture is how important it is actually to let go sometimes. How important it is actually to be vulnerable, to be safe within that, if it's in a safe environment. Now, I didn't realise that I'd actually done this to everybody. We've now got a montage of everyone who fell asleep. Ryan, never to be trusted, takes these photographs everywhere. There's a picture of him with all 12 people. But the safety and the vulnerability of sharing a picture like this, I'm in a influential position. I'm supposed to be highly respected, and this was my LinkedIn post about the trip. Because I thought it was important to actually share the fact that in the mental health world, no matter who you are, every one of us is vulnerable. Every one of us is a little bit broken. We don't have to be on our own. If you surround yourself with incredible people who share your vision, share your passion, share your connectivity, share your love of the world and each other, we can achieve a great many things. So I'll finish with the one last line. It is okay not to be okay. As if we set it all up. When you said it, I was like, oh. So it's actually okay. None of us have this incredible life. None of us have this life that's this beautiful high. It's like this, isn't it? But what's not okay nowadays is you keep that to yourselves. It's not okay that you can't reach out to get help. There are 10 people in this room that I would hope if someone reached out to you, they'd be comfortable to sit and have that conversation and say, I'm here if you ever want to talk. I appreciate how challenging things might be. Would you like me to help you? Every one of us do that within our own communities. We can actually drive a massive change in the mental health world. The conversation isn't something to be worried about. Let's make it the same way as we'll have a conversation about how shocking Port were last weekend. Let's make it the same conversation about where we're going to go on holidays when the border's all open. And would it be incredible if in the morning, sometimes we get up and one of those questions we ask isn't just, did you sleep all right? What are you doing today? How are you feeling? How you've been struggling a little bit? You want to chat about it?